Recording has started. So good morning, everyone. Welcome on the last day of November to our final DSL session for Warwickshire Education Safeguarding here. Carl Lewis, head teacher coach. We're joined by a number of guests today on a number of subjects. So welcome to you all. This will take just a fraction over an hour. We've set the time to be about, it should be an hour, 8 till 9 this morning. We hope it's going to be working for you, but it will run over by about 10 minutes because we've got a lot of content which we want to share. We don't have a session in December because we know you're a bit busy then, and then the next one is January. So without further ado, we'll get started, and we are recording. If you put your cameras and stuff on mute, microphones on mute, that would be great. Okay, let's try moving on to our next slide and see whether the technology works. Okay, I can't see you guys, but that's okay. So I hope that's all okay with you. Hopefully you can see just a summary there. And if anybody like Sophie or Linda, please tell me if you can't see what I'm projecting. So that's a summary of our group. So myself, Heidi, Sophie, Johanna, and Sally, and then our link person, who's our honorary member of the group, is Dawn Parsons, who's our education lead in the Children Families Front Door, and all of our contact details are there. As you know all of this probably already, but there may be some of you who haven't attended one of these before. Further contacts there where you can find contact details for Julia Kenny from Governor Services, Early Years, Sharon Kindred and her team, and also the LADO contact details as well. Dates for our Head Teachers Forum and DSL sessions are there, and also you will know that we also have a theme calendar throughout the year, and the last slide will tell you when January's meeting is. I'm going to test this now. We can't have Sally with us today, she's out on a Siam's visit, but so just a quick recording from Sally, hopefully this will work, to ask for your feedback. And there is can you hear that?
Hello everyone. Many of you will already know me, but for those newly appointed heads and DSLs, I'm Sally Kaminsky-Gaze and formerly served as a head teacher in Warwickshire for 22 years. Since March, I've held the position of head teacher coach within the safeguarding team led by Carl Lewis. All of us who work with children in whatever capacity within Warwickshire want to safeguard children as well as we possibly can by ensuring our practice is effective and purposeful. During our weekly safeguarding team meetings, we always reflect on our week's work and consider how effective our activities have been. During the course of a recent conversation, we wondered whether the content and presentation of what we offer you in the head teacher forums and the DSL meetings was helpful, informative, and what you wanted to hear or not. We want to be as supportive and as relevant and purposeful.
Sorry, I'll click it again. It's when I click on something else, it
with
stops.
Our content and delivery as we possibly can be. Therefore, it would be really, really helpful to us if you could tell us if we are hitting the spot or not. Could you have a think about whether the content of our sessions is useful to you? And if it's not, what would you prefer to be hearing? Is there too much or too little in the sessions? What would you like to be included? What would you see as improvements to the sessions? Tell us what you need. Sophie, I believe, is sending you a questionnaire. Not a questionnaire, a form to fill in with your feedback. But you can also drop a message into the chat. You can send an email to Carl or myself. You can call us up on the phone. But whatever method is easiest for you, we really do welcome your responses and your feedback so that we can ensure that our service to you is as good as it possibly can be. After all, we're all working together to safeguard children in Warwickshire as effectively as we possibly can. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll thank Sally for that. You can see I was on there as well. You may want to, hello, good morning, Andrew. You may want to pop your camera off because we're recording the session and I wouldn't want you to be, you might be centre stage. That may be fine for you. You may also see the QR code on there, which will be on at the end of the session as well, for you to give us some feedback. Just a quick reminder then that these are your area locality teams. Some of you may or may not be aware of that, and I've also added to this. So these are your team leaders for early help in all of your areas, with a few extra people, and also family information service contact details and family support worker helpline, which is quite underutilised. The first point of contact for schools and parents, which both can use, is that one, the family support worker helpline for your locality. Okay, just to mention again, the conflict continues. Thankfully, things are moving in a positive way. Just an update there of information, if you haven't seen it, on how to sensibly talk to children in your school. But health warning is there, sensitivity is required. And the idea is that children are going to ask you questions, and you just need to be prepared to be open with them and talk about that should they ask you questions. And sometimes children need something, you know, they might want to get involved in fundraising, or they may want to do something to kind of help them to be cathartic and try and take away the stress. So there's information there which we've shared before. We'll now move over to our main guests and speakers. We've got Jeff Thomas, who you will probably know, who's our Prevent Officer for Warwickshire. We're introducing Anne Pritchard, who's our Senior HMI Ofsted Inspector in the West Midlands and linked to Warwickshire as well. Good morning to you both. And we may have Sherry, our regional prevent person, but I'm not sure. I haven't had a chance to look at the guest list. That's what I tried to do when the video was playing, and it stopped the video when I tried to click on something else. But thank you for joining us today. And these guys are here to talk to us about Prevent and the changes to legislation and guidance. And particularly, it's great to have Anne here, because she can tell you about the impact that following these or not following these has on Ofsted inspections as well. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. Just let me know, Anne, when you want me to move on.
Thanks,
Good
Carl.
morning.
That's great. Thank you. I'm going to take my camera off again, if that's okay. Okay, so in terms of the inspection framework, I'm going to focus on the handbook and actually how we use the handbook to inspect around Prevent. I'm going to do it through posing a number of questions for you to consider as DSLs and leaders within your school. Every school is different, every school is unique, so I can't give you the answers for your individual school, but at least I can hopefully help you to think about the sorts of areas that you need to consider in terms of Prevent in your schools. So it's really important to understand that the risks of radicalisation and extremism run across the West Midlands. So we've got issues in all areas of the West Midlands. And what's really important is that do you, as the DSL, do your leaders, governors, but most importantly, do all your staff understand what the challenges are within your local community? And it's not just about knowing and understanding, it's about, do they know what that means in terms of the impact on the young people within your settings. And what's really important is that your staff, all of your staff, understand that radicalisation and extremism could happen here. It's about that whole culture of safeguarding, and it really runs through the whole of safeguarding within your school. Where we see weaker practice, where it raises significant concerns for us, is where we get staff saying, but that doesn't happen here, but we're in a nice area, we don't have to worry about issues like that. And that is a real red flag in terms of the safeguarding culture within schools. What's really important in terms of teaching children about understanding radicalisation and extremism and how to protect themselves from it is that it can't be a bolt-on. It absolutely cannot be a lesson or a unit of work. It needs to be threaded throughout safeguarding, SMSC, fundamental British values, PSHE. So how do you, as a DSL, a leader, do your staff understand where those threads of teaching children about understanding how to protect themselves from radicalisation and extremism, do you know where that is being taught? Do you know where pupils are being supported to understand this? Another thing to remember is that community contexts and challenges and tensions change over time. And do you, as leaders, do you review the challenges? Do you review what the dangers are? Who do you actually communicate with in terms of those dangers within the localities? And how do you identify those pupils that are vulnerable within your communities? Next slide, please, Carl.
Sure, no problem. There we go.
So if I take you to the handbook now, and it's particularly paragraphs 315 and 316, here you will see how the references in terms of radicalisation and extremism,
Sorry.
that's okay, thread through the handbook. And it, you know, we look at the curriculum, we look at assemblies, wider opportunities, the visits, discussions, the literature. So where is that within your school? Where is it within your curriculum? And this isn't about devising a prevent curriculum or a prevent policy. Nobody is expecting to see specific policies. What we do explore is where it is actually being taught throughout what you're already doing. So, Carl, if you could just put up the next slide, please.
Of course. Yep.
This is the question that's really important for you as leaders to actually consider in your school. And just think about, when was the last time this was discussed with staff, with leaders, and across the school? So how do teachers build pupils' resilience to extremism and teach them about fundamental British values? So when have you reviewed this as a leadership team? Where is it taught within your school? Who are the vulnerable pupils in your school in terms of radicalisation and extremism? How do you explicitly identify them? And most importantly, in terms of where it's taught throughout the curriculum, how do you know what the impact of it is? How do you check that the children that have been taught this understand it and know what to do? Or is it done as a checklist exercise? It's really important to know that what you are actually doing is having an impact. So if we just go on to the next slide, Carl.
Okay, we'll come back.
In terms of personal development, you'll see the inadequate bullet points here. There are two that actually explicitly relate to radicalisation and extremism and fundamental British values. And again, these underpin what I've already said in terms of what do you actually do as a school? Do you know where it's being taught and what the impact is? And in terms of the next slide, in terms of leadership and management, you'll see, if you just move on, Carl, that'd be great. You'll see that the good grade descriptor in leadership and management explicitly references those statutory duties in terms of the Equality Act and particularly the prevent duty in safeguarding. So are you, as leaders and governors, trustees for multi-academy trusts, are you explicitly fulfilling those statutory duties? And that's what's really important. So just to summarise in the last slide, please, Carl. These are the key bullet points that I'd just like you to draw your attention to. So how do you check if staff know how to identify vulnerable pupils? Do you just deliver the training and tick the box, or do you follow it up? Do you actually check that your staff understand how to identify and what to do if they have got concerns about vulnerable pupils? Where does protecting pupils from radicalisation and extremism sit within your wider safeguarding duties? Is it, if you're a DSL, have you considered prevent as part of your duties, or is it the job of somebody else? Because actually, in terms of safeguarding, it should thread throughout everything. In terms of the school's context, do all staff understand the context that in the community that the school is working within, and how regularly is that context reviewed and who with? And finally, just for you to consider, how have you taught, how do you teach pupils how to protect themselves from radicalisation and extremism? So in terms of the inspection framework, in terms of Ofsted, that's how we look, broadly speaking, at prevent within schools.
Okay. I've got a couple of other slides to show, but I think what I'll do is I'll stop sharing for a moment so that see what happens, so that people can see you again and see. We haven't got the chat open, but we have got Q&A open on the settings. So what I would suggest to people, we probably haven't got time now for many questions, if any, really, because there's so much content. But if people have any questions, can they send them on the Q&A or email them in, and maybe I could give you a bullet point list of a few questions if people have them, and I can share them later. Is that okay?
That'd be absolutely fine. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And Jeff, do you want to add anything on for the moment, or shall I start sharing slides again? Is there anything you want to add at this point?
No, if you start sharing the slides, Carl,
okay.
Might pick up a couple of points.
No problem. I will say just thank you again, Anne, and I'll let you go on your way if you need to be off somewhere. But thanks ever so much for attending, and I'll start resharing the slides, Jeff, with the next slide. So there we go. You're welcome to stay as well if you do want to. Hopefully people, I'll just need to just check that I've got my sound on. Apologies, I'll do it again because that's it. Sound on, share. Okay, because there's another video recording afterwards. Hopefully now we'll go on to the next slide. Jeff, could you just tell me if you've got that slide with the risk assessment on the screen?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. Tell me if I'll do it again then. Okay, try it again.
Yeah, that's good.
You've got that. Is that full screen? Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, fabulous. Do you want to talk this through?
Yeah, I would just make a few comments because I know you've got a bigger agenda. Essentially, the framework for Prevent was updated in September with new set of guidance specific for schools. Although it came into effect 7th of September, it takes operational impact from start of January. The whole point of the new guidance is not that it brings new duties, new expectations, but it kind of sets the current scene in terms of where we think the risk is around Prevent and where our focus should be nationally and within key sectors such as education. There is a kind of set of instructions for us within local authorities and with education to think about leadership, capabilities, competencies, and assessing risk. And that's very much what this slide addresses, thinking about how, and Anne's touched on this, how do we understand risk within a broader community, within Warwickshire, within the school locale that you're based in, and where can you get that type of information? There are templates to support you think through those issues, particularly Educate Against Hate and from DFE. We can provide support. So we provide support in a number of ways. We've provided an overarching statement as a partnership on the Prevent priorities for Warwickshire. We do whole school training during which we break down individual examples of risk, whether it be in person, whether it be online, the different manifestations of extremist activity across the county that you can then factor in to assess risk as it might impact on young people. So if you would like to kind of engage with us on that, we're absolutely happy to have a discussion about delivery on that. We provide a more in-depth session for DSLs, again touching on those comments that Anne made about the core role of DSL and safeguarding linking through to Prevent. We really try to look at that in some detail. But then outside of the training framework, if you're going through a risk assessment, if you want to have a conversation, if you want to explore, sense check your assumptions on radicalisation risk, please feel free that you can contact us. And very much Carl's got the contact details and I'm happy to support.
They're on the slides, Jeff. Yeah. They've got them on the slide. I think it's obviously people we encourage people to contact you or to contact Sophie to go on the Prevent training. It might be, would you think it'd be good advice for people to actually make a few notes about their context, their locality before they come on the training, and that will help them think about while they're reading all the information, they can say, well, our school community is made up of this many different nationalities or religions or different cultural factors, and so when you come in, you know, and whether there's a lot of transition in your community or whether they're stable, that kind of thing, economic factors, maybe that kind of thing. So I've put on there as well. I was curious. So the current national threat level is substantial, so I think that's slightly higher raised than normal. Is that right, Jeff? Substantial?
No, that's been consistent since Feb last
Consistent.
year.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So yeah, thank you, Jeff. I'll just do the next slide as well, which is relevant to this, and we'll move on. And that is, you may or may not have seen this. This is secondary school focused or colleges. So there's a video being created and lesson plan around Act for Youth launch, which is information, lesson plans and videos about counter-terrorism and how to teach young people from 11 to 16-year-old about that subject. It's not lengthy, but the simple concept is the run, hide, tell scenario, and it shows a cartoon of people in a shopping centre, that type of scenario, and how they behave there. It's not showing them in a school. However, it's quite emotive and quite sort of scary, so that's why I've got a big caution on there. But the YouTube clip is there as well, and there's a number of people like Jamie Vardy and Bear Grylls talking about run, hide, tell, and also the link there to Educate Against Hate and further other websites about helping you assess your risk. Okay, I'll move on to the next one and just say thanks again to Jeff and to Anne. And there's Jeff's contact details. All of this will be sent out afterwards with our bulletin. We're aiming to get that out at the end of the week, all being well. There's a lot of information. Okay, these are Jeff's slides, which are also included. We haven't got time to go through them now, but you've got reading materials from Jeff there, which may give you some pause for thought. And those were our slides that we used when we hadn't got Anne. And obviously you've heard about Ofsted now. So some things where you can think about those. You can click on the click here, and Sophie can help you book onto our Prevent training, which is one person or two people from each school, or you can contact Jeff with his details there if you want to book a bespoke training session for a staff meeting or a training day, that kind of thing, and how to make a channel panel submission as well. He's already there for you. You probably know that already. The other thing I'm just going to mention, a government documentation there about security and emergency planning. That might be part of your risk assessment. So what's your perimeter fences, your gate system, and things like that, and often people don't always stop and reflect. We have the same gates, the same fences, and then it's not until we have a child that absconds or a situation like that, a significant event, that we kind of reflect on that. And think about that lockdown or the emergency drills you might do on your next training day, perhaps, if you haven't done so recently. And there's also guidance there about college security guidance from the CSW, Coventry, Warwickshire and Solihull team. Other forms that are useful, which are just dropping in related to this, are racist forms that you can use if you need to report racism, and a form to use to report hate crime as well. So it's all in one place. I'm going to move on to quickly managing self-harm. I can't really give this great deal of time in this scenario, but you will be aware of me mentioning this before, probably, if you've joined us. The self-harm guidance, and I say guidance and not policy, is out for publication with this document, with this information that you'll get this week. We've worked on it for quite a long time. I came into it kind of 2 years or a year after it started. The aim is to have a document to start to guide people, staff, adults in school settings and in education about how to manage a situation with mental health, self-harm, suicide ideation. So this gives you an idea of what it looks like, and you can see who we've consulted and worked with. We've worked with a number of schools, or my colleagues worked with a number of schools at the beginning of the process. You can also see a 7-minute briefing on the Warwickshire Safeguarding website, and there's a lot of really useful stuff there. It's meant to be easy to read, and I'd recommend that as one of your starting points for staff, really, as a simple thing to raise awareness. This is useful about suicide ideation. That's an area where not everybody knows. People generally know what suicide is, but there's more to suicide than that. But also suicide ideation, talking about wanting to kill themselves or actively researching wanting to kill oneself or self-harm is what suicide ideation is. Talking about feeling hopeless, having no purpose, anxiousness and things like that. Can't go into it all now. There will be sessions for that, and so don't worry about that. All of this information will be shared. And then move on to the next slide. Self-harm definitions there if you wanted to use this with staff, okay, and also the signs of self-harm. This is just a snapshot really of what's in the guidance. And then the local picture here is, if we look here, 2017, higher rate of self-harm hospital admissions than the rest of the UK for 10 to 24-year-olds. So Warwickshire is higher for this area of concern than other counties, and our self-harm incidents went up. Thankfully to you guys for doing the audit, we get the data that says before lockdown there was 2,442 incidents of self-harm or suicide in schools, and then it went up in lockdown or just after lockdown to 6,551, and then since that last year 22 to 23 it's dropped a little bit, but what we found is it's less volume, less people per se, but more people repeatedly doing it. So that's something to be aware of. And then admissions have increased year on year from 2019 to 2022. So that gives you a good background on why this information is important. This is just a summary of why we need guidance for managing self-harm, how it works, how the document was created, and encouraging staff to start to open up the dialogue with a care that we know what we're talking about before we start talking about it. So you need to do some training, you need to work with staff. Everybody needs to know enough about this subject before you start going off and talking to young people. It's not a policy, and I'll just make that quick distinction. This is a guidance document because one, it's not statutory to have the policy, and two, if we have a policy, or if you have a policy, I should say, one, you have to, it's very difficult to adapt it for your setting. So it has to be personalised for your setting, which is a big job for you. Two, you need accountability. So with a policy becomes, this is the person in this school who is accountable for managing self-harm. And we think you're not ready for that just yet. We think we need to get the awareness first and move to a stage where you as a setting or a school feel confident about who are the main people that will be deployed to deal with that and what your school processes and procedures are. And that's a big job. So I think this is the first step, and we'll work towards that. And there will be other documents later. So the aims and objectives, the warning signs, how to respond initially. Not going to have time to go through it now. What do young people say they want when they people that have self-harmed? These are the things that they say they want to happen. So that's good training for school staff as well, and how staff can be supported. And that's the critical bit that you need to have in place as you start to move down this route. So supervision is a key part to this. If you haven't got supervision in place, you really shouldn't be starting down the route of exposing staff to dealing with self-harm incidents if you haven't got a process to look after the staff. And we'll talk about that. We'll it's an ongoing thing every year about supervision, or what supervision looks like. Is it just one meeting a week, or is there more to it than just that? It's about those low level contacts with other leaders that are checking everybody are okay. Some more documents there, so a flow chart, and then a load of contacts that you can use, and so can parents have on websites and things like that where you can share them with parents. But bear in mind, this isn't just for children. This could apply to adults as well, so be mindful of that. Then there's useful contacts for that as well. And then I thought that it would probably be some kind of risk assessment or something that a staff member would do if a young person self-harms, but actually what the preferred route is a plan, a safety plan that is done with the young person. In fact, the young person really owns it, and all we do is facilitate the plan, which is the preferred way of managing that risk. So that's all in the pack. It's all in what will be sent out to you. That's a starting point with the policy, with guidance, not policy. And then we'll be doing some road shows and training sessions after Christmas where people can come along. I don't know if it would be virtual. You can let us know what you prefer, virtual or in person. We'll also be doing sessions on harmful sexual behaviour as well. So we're looking at whether people would like to have, be out of school and do a half day on one and a half day on the other subject. Something for you to let us know. Lots of stuff for your newsletters and your websites and for you. And now I'm going to attempt to do the next subject, which is I may need to curtail this a little bit. a guest who spoke at our last session called Colin Walker, and we know that as well as self-harm, harmful sexual behaviours is a significant area of concern in schools. We have incidents of it happening across the ages, and we have high levels of anxiety from staff members in dealing with this. It's a really tricky subject, and people are not very confident. That's why we'll talk about Brooke in a moment, but this is an additional strand of support that I wasn't aware of, but you might find very useful. They can come into schools, and I'll hand over, if the video works, to Colin to tell you about it. Let's see if it works.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you for inviting me this afternoon, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Colin Walker, Head of Prevention and Early Intervention at SafeLine. SafeLine is an organisation that exists to prevent sexual abuse and support those affected by it. We're based in Warwick, and we provide a range of different services, both locally to the community here and nationally. Those services include counselling, drama and art therapy, a telephone helpline, and also an independent sexual violence advisor service to help any person that wants to report a sexual offence and go through the judicial process. I'm here today really to talk to you about our prevention and early intervention services, which are available to schools in Warwickshire. And I'm quickly going to go through them. Could you have the next slide, please?
Just bear with us. It will change in a moment. This is pre-recorded.
Thanks. The first intervention I'd like to talk about, which is available to both primary and secondary schools, is the SafeLine Safer Relationships course. That is for young people who are at risk of sexual abuse or already suffered abuse.
Oh, sorry, I put the chat on. Apologies, I'll play it again.
That could be online abuse, online grooming, or that could be in person. The Safer Relationships course is usually conducted over a period of 6 to 8 weeks. It's usually on a one-to-one basis, but in primary school, we do find it really effective in a group setting. So what we do is we talk about issues that directly affect that young person at that point in time, with the intention, if they've already suffered abuse, to prevent re-victimisation. Those topics include consent, internet safety, sexual harassment and sexual assault, abusive relationships, online grooming, and child sexual exploitation. And we really do have the conversations with the young people to establish what is going on, because quite often the referrals come in and we're not sure exactly what kind of abuse is going on, because young people are threatened. They feel that they can't talk to people about what's happened to them. So this intervention is so useful because it enables practitioners to build empathy with a young person. Just in the last 4 or 5 weeks alone, we've had several disclosures of rape occurring as a result of practitioners working 3 or 4 weeks into this course and then having that disclosure made because the young person trusts them. So basically, it allows the student to feel supported in the school setting. It tackles a lot of the issues highlighted by the Ofsted review in 2021, where young people felt they weren't heard, they weren't supported, that it was just normalised behaviour that was going on, and in effect, quite often not a lot of action was taken. So they feel empowered as a result of being on the course. They work towards an accreditation, an ASDAN accreditation in PSHE, and quite often they will do a presentation at the end, and that gives them a sense of achievement, but also they will go on to support other students who they feel may be at risk and vulnerable. So it's a really good relationships course, and we see highly successful outcomes from it. Next slide, please. So the next intervention I'd like to talk about is the SafeLine prevention course. So we recognised, obviously, from the Ofsted review and the work that we're doing in schools, that there was a real issue with regard to inappropriate behaviours. So this course is over a 4-week period. It is targeted at those individuals who are showing inappropriate behaviour. That may be online, or it may be in person in school, inappropriate touching or words or conduct, and they will work towards understanding the effect that their behaviour has on others, the law around what's going on, and anything that, you know, will have a knock-on effect to their careers, to what could happen to them in the future. And at the end of the course, they will sign a declaration to say they fully understand what consent is, they fully understand the law, and therefore, if school decide to, they can take more severe consequences, sanctions, and make sure that that person, you know, is dealt with effectively to prevent any further sexual abuse occurring. The next slide, please. So we recognised, obviously, as I said before, that there was a high prevalence of sexual harassment and sexual assault in schools. Ofsted highlighted it, and we do our own surveys in school. And what we discovered from those surveys is that around 75% of girls and 25% of boys said that they or their friends were affected by sexual harassment in school in year 9. When we got to year 12, that number had increased significantly to 96% of girls and 50% of boys. So there's a big jump between those years. We also established that sexual assault in schools was around about 18 to 20% for those girls in year 9. But when it got to year 12, the number was significantly higher, between 45 and 50%, who had said that they or their friends had experienced sexual assault in school. So therefore, what we created was an intervention where we would tackle the whole school. And we decided to go in at year 9 because that's where we saw the significant increase. And this whole school approach is a 3-phase programme, usually conducted throughout the academic year. So in the September-October time, we will work with the whole of year 9 and discuss issues that directly affect them. And we will establish what the numbers are like in that particular school, but also inform them about what consent is, about the effects of sexual harassment and sexual assault, and the consequences of that type of behaviour. They will also look at sexting and the implications of that and the consequences for them if they do behave like that. As a result of that, they feel a lot more informed in that first session. The second session, usually conducted January or February, involves young people watching a film that we've created called Barricade. So we work with 2 young film producers who got a grant from the British film industry to create a film that would enable young people to get involved in this issue, because they had seen what the results were of the Ofsted review and wanted to make a cultural difference to what was going on. So in that particular session, the young people immerse themselves in the characters of that programme, and they actually see for themselves what the effects are of sexual harassment happening there and then in school. As a result of that, we conduct a survey at the end of the programme. In the last session that we've done, 170 out of 230 of the young people involved stated that this session was extremely beneficial to them and they would take action as a result of it. Next slide, please.
I'm going to end it there and move on.
The third phase of this.
I'm going to leave it there and move on. There's one more area that Colin talks about in the recording, which is basically to say you've got a number of different strategies, and they do working with small groups as well. And basically, there's a whole range of stuff on their website. These are the slides. You may not get the whole recording, but these are the slides. So there's a safeguarding forum, which is somewhat like a school council, where it's encouraging schools to set up a group of people and have your safeguarding warriors, your safeguarding champions, let's say, where you talk about safeguarding and they build that into their structure. And there is actually an ASDAN qualification, which are really good. I've seen ASDAN stuff before. It's really good. So the young people might find that a way of getting like a qualification or something to put on their CV for the future to show that they've taken a role of responsibility and looking out for their school. So there's a lot of stuff there. There's training for teachers teachers as well and staff. There's parent workshops which are also there available. They'll come and do staff meetings, and they'll come and do evening sessions for parents. And there are the contact details for Colin. Sorry, I have to cut it a bit short because I'm conscious of time. But yeah, it's not something I was aware of until quite recently. So I'd really recommend you consider contacting them. It is a limited resource. They're not funded by anybody. I don't know how they are funded, but they have finite resources, so I would consider contacting them sooner rather than later. Particularly, I'd say secondary schools would find that really, really useful. Just a quick update on HSB on that subject. We've shared this with you before, but this is the current document here that we recommend you use if you have a harmful sexual behaviours incident. Ideally, don't read it when you've had one, read it beforehand. And also the document that goes with it is on the next slide, which is the safety plan or risk assessment that you need to complete for the young person or the young persons involved in the incident. I've dropped this in. Somebody sent me this link here, which is from the NSPCC. It's actually a podcast, so there's no video, but I think you could find that quite useful for staff meetings or for sessions with staff, just listening to it. It's a podcast discussion about harmful sexual behaviours and how to deal with it for staff. So it's quite good at just raising that general awareness. So I had listened to that yesterday, and I'd recommend that. And obviously it's free, just click on the link. So another piece of useful resource for you there. And there's the guidance in that booklet. And I created a Word document template, which we normally send out with the booklet so that you can fill that in. Okay. So also Loudmouth Theatre we've mentioned before, and we've had Eleanor speaking previously. So Loudmouth Theatre available until April, or say March actually, in schools to do sessions, theatre in education, about the subjects of exploitation, harmful sexual behaviours, county lines and those subjects. So sign up for that if you haven't already. Time is running out. We don't know if it'll be available next year. A reminder that the VORG strategy is out there, and if you've got a spare moment to have a look at that, that's all connected to harmful sexual behaviours. Really, all the harmful sexual behaviours are the things that lead up to harassment, violence against women, and rape, and even more brutal situations which we hear about on TV. So this strategy starts young. It's about developing a culture of women and females and girls being safe, and how we manage that in schools and early on, so that they don't become criminals later on. And then just as related to employee well-being, it's a slightly different odd segue, but needed to put it somewhere. If you've got members of staff that need additional support or want to sign up to it, I don't know, have to be a WES subscriber, but just to remind you about well-being at this time of year, it's particularly difficult coming into Christmas for some people. There's a website, a portal, you log on to it, anybody can do it if you're subscribed to it, and you can just do an online sort of self-survey to find out how's your well-being. And if you do need counselling or other services, then there's a whole range of stuff out there for you. Some quite, another subject to do with safeguarding. Again, very difficult to cover it in this session in any depth, because we're trying to pack a lot in. We haven't got a session in December, so the next time will be January, but I do want to share this with you. And again, it's something probably to look back at rather than to listen to now and try and take immediate action. So we're really grateful that you do the audit every year. Don't panic. We're not going to say we're doing it next month or anything. We're doing it in March. The next one will be in March, launched in March. Don't worry about that. This is just the feedback from last year's audit. So that's what it looks like. If you're not familiar, maybe you're new to Warwickshire. It's a fairly clear audit, and then what I have to do is a management report to the SLT, the senior officers in the authority. So this is again something to look at afterwards. I've highlighted the key findings from the audit from all of the schools and settings across Warwickshire. So more schools completed the safeguarding audit. Chairs of governors need to be reminded and about the requirements. So we still have a few that don't do it, and we have to chase those people up. And that may be relevant when schools have Ofsted that they haven't done it. More pupils and more per setting are on free school meals than previously. The pupils on the SEN register has been a slight increase there. There's more DSLs and DDSLs. There are some settings that haven't yet got to grips with CPLA, so looked after children. I think I've put keeping of records of that and who's the nominated person. Senkos, that's works. There's fewer schools that have qualified SENCO, so a quarter of schools do not at the moment have a qualified SENCO. And then do DSLs meet with the representative on the governing body? Well, yes, the vast majority do. 3/4 of chairs access training. So there's lots of information there of safeguarding lessons learnt reviews. Are schools prepared? Some of them are not. Only half are prepared to do a lessons learnt review if you have a death or a serious incident in school. And there's a number of information there which you can look at. It'll be clearer than that if you get the whole document, but I've just highlighted the salient bits for you to be aware of. Unfortunately, there's never enough time to cover everything, and I'm conscious that you've got a busy day ahead of you. But I think you'll find that useful for you to go, oh, that may be the case in our school. These are the subjects that you guys have got some confidence in understanding. You can't read that easily there, but it's about CME and EHE, that sort of subject, restorative practice. So a bit of confidence, and then some subjects where it's are less confident are hate and hate crime, self-harm, guidance, awaiting sign-off, network support, private fostering, reflective supervision, and requirements for safeguarding in early years. That's what it came back in the survey. There's the mention of self-harm. So all the stuff that we'll be talking about will be connected to the subjects that you've told us about. So self-harm figured prominently. That's why we've been working hard on that subject. A recording system cropped up. There was a slight dip in confidence in recording safeguarding, and the only thing I can assume is that some people moved from paper copies to electronic systems, or maybe just in that stage in between. But just some questions there about tracking and reviewing safeguarding. Again, I'm going to move on. You're welcome to look at that if you've got time. As a result of all of that, then what I've done is set up priorities for the authority and for schools and settings to be aware of where, if you unpick it all, what are the action plans really for us to look at? And they include, more schools taking part in it, engagement of governors, and governors being really on top of things. One thing that governors were less aware of, for example, was attendance and what the governors' responsibilities were, and how the governors engage with leaders in the school and DSLs to ask questions about attendance. So why is our attendance like this? What percentage of persistent attendance issues? What does the school do about it? What can governors do about it? So things like that. 7-minute briefings, compliance with the single central record was there, prevent was there, that's why we're talking about it, filtering and monitoring is there, that's linked to prevent as well, management of persistent absence, culture of vigilance, everybody being aware, CME mentioned again, contact with so any inconsistencies with the audit for us to follow that up, managing self-harm, increased awareness of recording systems, risk assessment for prevent, we've mentioned that earlier, attendance, so we've mentioned again common themes, physical restraint, and really that's the positive ethos and the reduction of exclusions and suspensions is a priority area, and that's why we've got Johanna working on the Lost at School project. Or we've got behaviour as general, harmful sexual behaviour, Brooke training, violence against women and girls, and so on. Lots of information, bit of bedtime reading, maybe not, but some kind of reading when you've got a spare moment to catch up. Just a reminder for those people that aren't aware and aren't registered, Operation Encompass for domestic abuse situations, you get an email. Operation Missing from Home, for obvious reasons, you get an alert if a child has gone missing and has been reported to the police. Operation Guarding, if the police are working with a family or a child where they've had pornography, self-generated pornography sent to them or reported to the police, they will keep in touch with you by the usual method. We're talking to the police about trying to amalgamate those systems into one registration. We'll do our best and let you know how that goes. Stuff on mental health in Warwickshire, so useful information to the left here, and contacts and network group. I used to go to that network group when I was a head teacher. I found that really useful, and there's the QR code to join it. So that's a PSHE type of area. Then we move on to mental health, really good assemblies, actually, some quite good slides here which are available from PHE School Zone. So that's what they look like. They're really short things about different things like vaping, what is well-being, what is mental health, really nice and simple and visual. RSHE now, Relationships and Sex Education. I've mentioned this previously. Catherine Winton is your contact for that. And like mental health, they also have a network where people can attend. So maybe your PSHE person or your DSL or whoever, DDSL, somebody in school could attend that. And it's really important we link the harmful sexual behaviours and violence against women into what we are teaching about sex and health education. DBS checks, this is a quick reminder, visiting schools, people contacting us when they have Ofsted. Most people are fine. However, just make sure you've got no gaps in your single central record. Perhaps if there's a training day and your office staff are doing it, just double check, make it blindingly obvious that there are no gaps, and somebody just check, because people can become a bit blind to seeing mistakes. Checking that you've done your barring checks, okay? For anybody that teaches a class, whether they're a TA, a HLTA, whoever, if they teach a class even once and have that responsibility, they need the barring check at the same time as the DBS. So just check, because sometimes Ofsted asks that question and schools are a bit wobbly and unsure about it. Governors and managers need a 128 check as well. So when you're on the DFE signing, just check if anybody's governor or manager of a setting, have they got a 128 check as well, and that tells you why. And the signing is your normal DFE signing, and there's lots of guidance there down the side. Okay. We talked about filtering and monitoring before, part of Ofsted and KICSI. Make sure you know as part of this whether you have got filtering and monitoring, and who in your school is set up to manage that. Is the contract being renewed? When is it renewed? What does it cover? How do you know it works? If you subscribe to the Warwickshire's ICTDS, you can access Smoothwall, and you get all of those phone calls if there's any incidents online. Anybody typing about suicide in your setting will be picked up, and there'll be a phone call made to school. You can get training and other useful web resources, and the contact for that, as in Henry VIII's wife, but not, and she can help you with resources from the Smoothwall company, who provide it on behalf of ICTDS. I know that the Warwickshire WES brochure will be coming out soon, and we'll be thinking about budgets. That's a good time to talk to the relevant people in school about who do we get for our filtering and monitoring, and why, and how much does it cost, and does it do a good job. A quick update on ICT. I'm not going to spend time on this. We'll maybe do this in January, but WhatsApp's cropping up at the moment, and something called some kind of private groups that people are being asked to join, or actually not even being asked. People can join people automatically to WhatsApp groups. This one, Add New 11 is one that's cropped up in recent months. People force you into joining it, and then it ends up with lots of sexual imagery and very unpleasant stuff. People are not always aware that they have to change their privacy settings, and that's where you go. And you can share that with parents and young. They shouldn't be on there. I mean, it should be 16 for WhatsApp, but even so, we know the reality. So whoever it is, you can send it out to the parents, but you may need to sort of let it at their level as well, at the pupil level, so that they're aware of the settings. Maybe tell the parents via the pupils, or tell the pupils via the parents. Snapchat as well, you can turn off tracking. So some people might see, I can get a message on Snapchat saying I can see you at the dentist, I know where you are, that type of thing. So you can go on to ghost mode on Snapchat. Again, probably shouldn't be on there, but we know they are. And some guidance generally there. Some other stuff there on TikTok and certain crazes. We don't know if this is verified really, but last year there was some incidents where there was like a challenge on TikTok to take as many paracetamol as you can, and then it's the person who people encourage you to take high dose of paracetamol and attempt to be hospitalized. The aim is for people to stay in hospital as long as possible, and the person who wins, stays in hospital the longest, wins the challenge. So I can probably hear you gasping and stuff like that back in your offices, but there we go. That's not to say it's happening now, don't panic. It's just that these types of things happen, so it's about trying to intervene and prevent people from taking part in those things. I think TikTok was also used for that big gang thing, where a flash mob where they went into Oxford streets in London and raided all the shops. So being aware of that as well, that TikTok may be a fun thing but can be can be used for other things. A quick signpost to the work that Johanna is doing on collaborative and proactive solutions and the work lost at school. If you want to know more, there will be a session coming up later on after Christmas for people who are interested, but there's her email if you are interested. A reminder about the vaping stuff we shared last time. If you missed it, there's some information, and also information on how to make sure you are sensibly and correctly searching, screening or confiscating if that is necessary in schools. Stuff on the news today about vaping again. The holiday sessions over Christmas, you're probably aware of the HAF, so just make sure your children are on free school meals, or I think it's available to send children as well. So being aware of who those people are and who in school is letting everybody know that's going on, and when it's on over Christmas, put it in your newsletters. And all of our training as usual is there. You can find all of our training from different places, our own training from the Warwickshire Safeguarding Partnership, Send and Inclusion Training, Early Years and ICTDS. Just bear in mind the Send and Inclusion Training I think runs termly, so the link will work up until Christmas, and when they publish the next one for the spring we'll update the link if it's different. And we also do half-day audits in schools, so we're being asked to do audits. We do our best to come in and have a look at your safeguarding setup prior to Ofsted. Doesn't have to be Ofsted. Also look at your recording systems, also your single central record, your policies, or your website, all of those things. If you're interested, get in touch. Nearly there now. It's coming up to the last slide, so we've nearly made it exactly an hour. These are the dates coming up. This is the last one now this year. So these are the dates coming up in January. Here's the QR code. Point your camera at it as you do, and you can give us some quick feedback. We'd appreciate it. We hope you found today's content and subject and guests useful and informative. And we just want to say thank you for all the hard work that you do as DSLs working in our schools in Warwickshire, supporting families and young people, supporting each other, their well-being, and things to think about. What have you learned today? What did you know and you've had that reaffirmed? What made you think differently today? Was there anything new? What are you planning to do? A couple of takeaway points there. Is it urgent? Is it soon? Or is it maybe in the next year? Or is it never? But those types of things, just some things to think about. And so we won't be having this forum again now before Christmas, so all that remains is to say thank you very much for taking this time before school today. Hope it's been useful. We do want some feedback to know. We've had about 30 people here. A couple of them have nipped off now. I appreciate that. But thank you all for sticking with it. And if you've got any more feedback, let us know. Have a really good run up to Christmas. Hope all the nativities go well. And I'll be turning the video off, and I'll still be around afterwards to talk to if you want to chat. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Have a good Christmas. I'll stop sharing first of all. And then you're welcome to put cameras on and have a chat if you want to. You're welcome to go if you need to. I can see people exiting, and I'm stopping the recording now if I can. Record, stop recording, stop.